Here tonight.
In 1989, one of America's landmark TV stations celebrated its 40th anniversary. As a pioneer and a pace setter in the industry, WFMY-TV has compiled a record of community service unequaled in television history. It's impossible to tabulate the millions of dollars raised for charitable and public service projects. Nor is there a way to know how many lives have been changed, how many generations have been elevated and enriched because of Channel 2's caring attention to projects for personal and social change. During these 40 years, hundreds of talented and creative people have passed across or behind your TV screen. This commemorative program is dedicated to them and to you, our viewers, because through celebration and crisis, through tears and through smiles, we've all participated historically in the making of local television.
This special program is brought to you by Chrysler Jeep Eagle, Gate City Federal, Rice Toyota, Rice-Marko HYUNDAI.
News and news too.
Here we go. What's this Winston say? Don't have drive-by.
Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem. Is Winston-Salem safe?
Stand by.
Sundry Hughes. We are Randy Jackson. And Mike Hogwood with sports.
Good evening. Fear is casting a shadow over residents.
When WFMY-TV premiered with Don Hardison's 5-minute news summary on August 18th, 1949, television technology was still in its infancy, and newscaster Hardison was victimized by it.
We had the first live, of course, in the state, and Don Hardison was our announcer. And the night of this first live newscast, we were all set to go, and we were all keyed up. I was sitting at the video console. As I remember, Bill Young was sitting at the audio console for the sound. So we got all ready, and we gave Don the cue to start talking. We immediately put him on the air. You could see Don, you could see his mouth moving, but we didn't have any sound. And so we stopped and started over again. We went back to the slide and then got all ready, and we cued him again. We found we'd had the wrong microphone or something to this effect. Cued him again, and up came Don. Beautiful picture, mouth moving, no sound. And about that time, Don was getting a little unhappy with the situation too. And just as the audio man found the correct switch and threw the switch, we heard on the air the first words, "Judas Priest." And this was from Hardison because he was a little unhappy. But after that, things ran pretty smooth.
It had been tough just getting to the sign-on. The station's debut was postponed when the antenna, a vitally important piece of equipment, took a costly tumble.
I had just seen the cable slip slightly on the antenna, and it crushed one of the small transmission lines. So I had just walked under and walked into the building, and since we had one spare transmission line for the antenna, one spare left, I should say. We'd already damaged a couple. And while I was in the building, some things happened that I was not aware of, and I walked back out of the building, walked under the antenna, which was leaning against the side of the tower, and someone, I don't remember who, said, "Your antenna's broke." And I said, "Yeah, I've got the transmission line here to fix it." And they said, "No, look." And I looked up, which I had just walked under this thing, and I looked up, and it was bent. It was laying against the side of the tower, and one cross brace of the tower had bent even. As it turned out, the tower company had used a brand new load line, this big long piece, but they had used an older piece of cable to hold the lower block so that it would be centered in the base of the tower. And this older cable had parted. And when it did, of course, then the antenna fell until the load line could be caught up within the tower itself.
My first reaction was, well, the chief engineer, our fine chief engineer, Doyle Thompson, says, well, we'll have to send it back to Camden, New Jersey, RCA, the plant, and have it fixed. Well, that was going to take 2 to 3 weeks. Now, here's my reaction. Strange as it may seem, I said, that'll make us money. because we won't lose anymore while that's being fixed, because we were just losing it, all the time.
Within a few months of the time I came to work, I worked from midnight to 8 on maintenance, fixing everything that broke the day before. And that went on for years.
In 1949, there were more than 225,000 homes in the Triad, but only about 2,500 of them had TV sets. WFMY-TV's birthing years were cramped by the lack of production facilities. When executives at the Greensboro News Company decided to cram their TV operation into a 15 by 25-foot studio, they created a challenge for the fledgling production staff.
After a while, we thought, gee, wouldn't it be nice to be in a larger studio? But fact of the matter was, we were dealing with the space that we had, and local live programming mushroomed because there was nothing else to put on. There was no syndication in those days, and movies hadn't been released to local television stations. So the whole thing was local driven and also advertiser driven. We had advertisers who wanted to put on a 15-minute hillbilly show, and then another one who wanted to do something else. And then we would have a 15-minute newscast to put in there. So we were literally doing 4 shows back to back in a space 15 by 25 feet.
Come on, Ma, and come on, Pa. We've got something for you all. Saturday night, 6:30, you know, so pull up a chair and see our show.
Harvey Furniture, North Elm Street in Greensboro, invites you to spend an enjoyable 30 minutes of rhythm and song with the Carolina Rangers.
Expediency was the creator. Almost everything that happened grew out of the expediency of the moment. We need someone to do this. We need a show like this. We needed a staff musician, so we had a guy that we could call in on a moment's notice and roll the organ into the studio and be creating a local live show with Howard Wainick playing the organ just on call. And variety shows were created because that was something that we knew we could do. It was do-it-yourself television, and it was learn-on-the-job television.
In the 40s and 50s, Bill Jeffries was singing on the Civic Club circuit in Burlington. He was also the star of WFMY-TV's TV Song Shop.
You were meant for me. I was meant for you. Nature patterned you.
Bill Jeffries' announcer was the legendary Ted Knight, who went on to stardom as the overbearing anchorman on the long-running Mary Tyler Moore Show. But TV Song Shop, like all the early live programs, was produced with a single studio camera.
That's good news and bad news. The good news was that we had one, so they didn't get in each other's way. Bad news was that you couldn't change shots. The only way you could change a shot, if you needed to go from a medium or a long shot to a close-up, the director would go to black, you'd change lens, you were on a turret then, you didn't have a zoom, so the director would say, I'm black, the cameraman would change to a close-up lens, and then he'd be punched up again.
WFMY-TV signed on, there was just enough electronic gear on hand to get the station on the air. When the first telecasters began to make local programs, they discovered the need for additional equipment. That put the pressure on the station's engineers to do their own research, development, and manufacturing.
Back then we built switchers, we built equipment, none was available. Then the manufacturing companies started building better. The video switcher, I remember we built one that had 4 provisions for 4 sources. It was homemade. All you did was punch it up.
Okay, stand by Studio 1. We'll be coming in 15 seconds. Forrest, you got those cards ready?
Cards are all set up and ready for camera 3.
Okay, ready 4 on an opening shot on the old Rebel set. Okay, 3 ready on the card. Stand by music.
Ready.
Cue. Coming in on 4. Ready 4. And take. Okay, camera 3. Break away from your cards now and go to a close-up on the old Rebel. All right, ready 3. Take.
Howdy. Hello, Troubles. How are you? Boy, we're going to have a real good show today. We've got another chapter to our
In the early
serial
50s, what was to become a local programming phenomenon premiered. The Old Rebel Show, starring George Perry. In the decades to come, thousands of children all across the Piedmont literally grew up with the Rebel. They had their birthday party on the show. But how did all this happen?
There was a program called Six Gun Playhouse, and the master of ceremonies, or the kids' MC for the show, was a guy named Portman Paget, who got his break to go to New York in the fall of 1951. And with Portman leaving, that naturally left a hole in our schedule, because we had a lot of old movies to run, a lot of old westerns, and a lot of the old cliffhanger serials, and we needed somebody to get on and talk in between those. And that, I say it that way because that's literally the approach. We said, go on and say something between these movies. And so when this guy left, we said, well, what are we going to do? George Perry said, I believe I could do that. So he became the MC on Six Gun Playhouse and developed the character of the old Rebel.
The first performer added to the Rebel Show was staff announcer Jim Tucker.
Well, the old Rebel was looking for a partner, or looking for somebody to help him out, and I happened to know 2 or 3 chords on the guitar, and I said, well, we'll try something. And I brought in my old guitar. It was an old one I'd had since I was a child, and we started doing a few little folk songs. Some we borrowed from Burl Ives from here and from there, and finally I got a better guitar, and a few years later went to the old 5-string banjo when the Kingston Trio was popular. And then I went to, finally had a one-man band for a number of years. I won't say how many exactly, but we played to over 100,000 households every afternoon. I wanted to be a person who could do something, you know, at least a little bit along the cowboy line, so I got interested in trick roping. I'd always been a Will Rogers fan. And I scoured around and got some basic information on it and learned to do a few of the simpler tricks. And then, well, I got lucky. Haynes Corporation here in Winston-Salem and Bluebell over in Greensboro decided to sponsor a rodeo every year. They wrote in the top names, very best in the country, and they had some of the best trick rope artists. And I got to know them, people like Virginia Hadley and Rex Rossi, and Jackie Reinhardt, Jack Bushbaum. I'd follow them around. They'd come out and be on our program, and then they'd tell me, come on now, I'll show you a few more tricks. So every year I'd learn a few more, and finally got a pretty good routine going.
Lee Marshall, as Lonesome Lee the Clown, fulfilled a lifelong ambition to perform, playing a foil to the Rebels' antics. Uncle Roy Griffin, for years director of the Greensboro Community Center, Roy led songs and cheers and acted in skits. Sometimes members of the production crew were recruited or volunteered to be a part of the Reb supporting cast.
When I had the opportunity to fill in basically as a puppeteer on George's show, when his puppeteer, I think, took a job in another market, George asked who would like to try this, and I said, well, I'll give it a try. I was a ham at heart. And George taught me an awful lot about not only television and basics as far as that goes. I think he had been in the business for many, many years before I had got involved with him. But his ability to work with children and understand not only children, but what tends to motivate them, and a very genuine, sincere, and I think that's very important, because there are a lot of people who can program at children, but there's not that many that can program at children, and children can also relate back to them. And George had that unique talent. So I learned an awful lot from him, and I think he had that, indeed, genuine love for people, but certainly I think he did have that special spot in his heart for children.
I'm made out of balsa wood. I think George carved me. He did the whole thing. He used to love to get into that. He used to carve and do whatnots. I've got oh, I'm sorry. Don't move. I'll hold my head still. How's that? Any better? I used to flop my ears a bunch too.
We ended up calling him Mr. Wigglesworth because we couldn't find anything funnier than the name Wigglesworth for a 4-year-old kid to try to say. So he became Mr. Wigglesworth, and I just kind of cracked my voice a little, and I still find myself talking to my hands a lot in business meetings. Hello. So it was kind of an evolutionary thing.
Carol Stoker had graduated from radio as a woman's director into television as a woman's director, and most of what happened in the early days of television was driven by what radio had done. So this was a natural transition for Carol. So one of the things that early television could handle was a woman's director being on doing interviews with people. So Carol naturally rolled over from radio into television and became the woman's director of Channel 2 television.
And then there was RFD Piedmont. When he wasn't in his rebel costume, George Perry was WFMY-TV's farm director. For 18 years, Cordelia Kelly was the popular hostess of What's Cooking Today.
I was the first director of her show. She came down from what used to be Ellis Stone, wound up being Tallheimer's. She was there, and she came down and literally beat the doors down here and said, I am going to do a cooking show on this television station. And, and the powers that be said, no, well, no, you're not. She said, yes, I am. And within a few weeks, she was doing a cooking show because her personality penetrated the powers that be here, and they were able to see, well, now, this little lady has something. She can be good on television. So they put her on.
I remember one time we found out she was making banana pudding, and Bob Waddell and myself rigged up a banana and put it in with her regular bananas, so that when she peeled this particular banana, it was already sliced. Her only reaction was that Jim Tucker's been playing in the kitchen again.
The tricks I pulled on her, because I worked with her for 10 years at least, every show. And she used to call me Dear Bangle, the little devil. She never knew what to expect. I think one of the worst things was one Thanksgiving she had a turkey she had cooked the day before. And so just before the show she comes in, checks, and puts the turkey in the oven, which of course was cold, and then runs back to do a little makeup repair. So while she's gone, we put a mannequin's head in the oven. So comes showtime, you know, and well, it's time for the Thanksgiving turkey. She goes to the oven, and there's a mannequin's head. So she breaks up completely. She became, there again, a part of the humor. And she covered up. She probably wanted to kill all of some of the crew, but she made light of it. And of course the audience just loved that human touch between Cordelia and her boys. She calls her boys.
In the late 50s, the WFMY-TV sales department sold a Santa Claus show to a Greensboro discount store, and staff announcer Dave Wright discovered a starring role.
I remember the one thing I did about Santa Claus is I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it very much as an actor. I in a sense, became in the Disney philosophy that this will be Santa Claus. And when I put everything on, I'm going to play the character. And my own children, I say this it's a matter of accomplishment. My own children talked to Santa Claus and did not know it was Dad. It's all over good.
Yeah, it was great.
And I can remember probably one of the most emotional things that ever occurred in connection with my work is that we had very careful screening so that every child had to have his name on and was checked out up front, and there could only be so many children, and they could only be of a certain age and that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, over in that studio, a child that was too large, too tall, came in and sat down on my lap. And I realized that this child must be probably 12, 13 years old. And so I said, you know, what would you like for Christmas? And she said, I don't want anything. Said, but I would like to have a coat for my brother and a dress for my mother. And I suddenly began to realize this person somehow had broken the security to come to the real Santa Claus, the one that was on television. And she asked nothing for herself. And as fast as the program was over, we went off the air, I jumped up, and we could not find her. No one knew how she came in. No one knew what happened to her. And I'll never forget it. That's an unforgettable moment.
I came to work at WFMY-TV on the 16th day of April, 1956, and when I started here as a staff announcer, they told me it would be a long time before I'd ever be on television. I'd be behind the scenes announcing. But as it happened, one of the announcers left, and within weeks, they had assigned me to produce and host a bi-weekly afternoon variety show called TV Matinee. I inherited a great trio led by Howard Wainick, who was a reigning musician in Greensboro for many, many years. It also included Don Hanson, professor of music at Greensboro College, and one of the greatest talents to ever work at WFMY-TV, Bob Waddell.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, darling, kiss me, kiss me. Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you.
In the late 50s, Bob Waddell won the Arthur Godfrey Talent Scout Show on CBS and became a national star. The people who became early station managers learned TV on the job like everybody else. Gaines Kelly came from the classified ad department at the Greensboro News and Record to manage WFMY-TV's building, sign-on, and early success.
Gaines Kelly, I thought when I first came to work for him, didn't know what he was doing. He was absolutely... So why does a man do things like that? And as our relationship grew, and over the years, I found out that it was really youth versus age, and it was amazing how much Gaines Kelly learned in the first 5 years I was here.
I did get a little thrill one of those first 12 months when our peanut machine made 38 cents profit. Yeah, those were the days.
He also was a man who knew how to deal with people and to motivate people. And he was the type of person who would give you a job to do and let you do it.
His decisions were right on target. His business sense was uncanny, and I had to get away from it to realize that he really knew what he was doing.
Late in 1957, a WFMY-TV executive got the bright idea to create a morning show.
I was production manager at the time, and the program manager, Gomer Lesh, said, well, we need to do a show in the morning.
I guess the few of us that are left here to remember the beginning of the Good Morning Show all have a different story about it. The way I remember it was I was walking down the corridor, one of the hallways here at Channel 2 one morning, and program director Gomer Lesh stopped me and he said, hey, how would you like to do a morning TV show? And I said, fine, what'd I do? And he says, I don't know, you think about it and let me know.
Things started, I believe, as a half-hour show. And I think your approach was, well, heck, I can do anything for a half hour. So we started a rip and read morning show, and immediately started thinking of ways that we could get away from what I refer to as rip and read, and that is just sit there and read the news. I think what made the distinction for Channel 2 was that we developed a philosophy, two philosophies. One was we are a family in the community, and we are a part of your community. And we worked very hard on creating the idea on the part of the viewer that we were their friend. We were like family. And the other thing, the second thing that distinguished Channel 2 was that we developed personalities.
Been a long time.
Closed, WFMY-TV had been broadcasting from its new Phillips Avenue studios in Greensboro for almost 5 years. But specialization for the people who worked in local TV was still a few years away.
In the early days, there was a news director, but it was just an anointed position. It was a staff announcer who did the 6 o'clock news.
But that situation would change dramatically in the 60s. While WFMY-TV was celebrating its 10th anniversary, scandal and scathing criticism of the industry were capturing the national headlines. First, there was the craze over quiz shows. Then the ethical crisis that accompanied the revelation that answers had been rigged on some of the most popular programs. Then came the charge by FCC Commissioner Newton Menow that TV programming amounted to a vast wasteland of violence, repetitive formulas, irritating commercials, and sheer boredom.
Channel 2 reacted to that by doing a series of locally produced documentaries. We became, I believe we did one a month after we got geared up to do those. And this became a creative outlet for the staff. The staff members looked upon this as an opportunity to go beyond the daily routine. And they accepted these things with relish and said, hey, pretty soon we had a whole backlog of titles and subjects that we could do submitted by the staff.
The first WFMY-TV documentary examined the dropout problem in North Carolina. The Ones Who Quit was written and produced by WFMY-TV's Director of Research, Catherine Sloan. The third phenomenon, and by far the most important to spur the development of local TV news, happened in Greensboro on February 1st, 1960. Late that afternoon, a caller informed the newsroom that 4 students from the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College were sitting in at the downtown Woolworth store's all-white lunch counter, waiting to be served.
I still feel a little bit of a chill. I heard someone say, we've just received a phone call that there are 4 of young men from A&T sitting in at Woolworth's. And somebody said it's too late to get film, we'll try to cover it tomorrow. And I had the distinct feeling at that time, and it proved to be true, that was a moment the universe changed.
Within weeks, the sit-in phase of the civil rights movement spread to 64 cities in 9 states.
To have thousands of people in the street was not an unusual thing in the days that followed the sit-ins. Because at that point you were having civil rights leaders from all over the country come here and lead demonstrators like Farmer. And when they brought in their expertise, they knew that television could help. Now, the original sit-in folk did not call a television station and say, hey, Tim, come take pictures of us, we're going to do this. But once the organizations began to arrive, they knew that the best way to get people's attention was to have the big demonstration and have it on television. And so an attorney who was hired by those people who were maintaining the philosophy that we serve only those we wish to serve was employed to represent them. And he said, he was Armistead Sapp, and he told me once that he told them that he would be their redneck attorney, and he would appear on national television espousing their philosophy. He said, however, the decision is not going to come in a court of law, and this decision is not going to come in a civil suit. The decision will come one day when you sense what the people sitting at home in their living rooms have decided. And he said, indeed, it happened that way. That one day his clients came to him and said, we think the people at home are tired of seeing this, and let's open our doors. And so, therefore, we were in an integrated public situation before the Civil Rights Act.
The next major demonstrations occurred in Greensboro across an 18-day period from May 11th to June 7th, 1963. Time and again, marchers, sometimes numbering in the thousands, spread into Greensboro's downtown business district. At one point, there were more than 1,400 young blacks in jail. During this period, student activists at A&T State University encouraged Jesse Jackson to accept a leadership role.
First time that I saw Jesse Jackson, he was a student at A&T, and he and Boyd Morris, who was the manager of a cafeteria, were standing in the doorway screaming at each other, while an NBC cameraman and his sound man screamed at each other trying to cover it, with a mob of people outside. You see, he was not one of the originals, but he very, very much came to the forefront in a very, very quick way.
On the campuses and out in the streets, News 2 reporters and cameramen found themselves challenged by the tension of the 60s.
The thing that gets me, I think, is that we kept hearing things around our ear. Z. So that night after we finally got through and went home, I told my wife, I said, well, there were bees in the alley there. And she said, fool, there were not any bees out at that time of night. We were being shot at.
As more and more protesters went out into the streets, professional news gathering equipment was needed to record the stories. Former chief photographer Bill Gordon remembers what it was like to finally film sound to go along with the action.
Well, about 56, 57, we got a sound camera, Archon sound camera, and some of them are big and bulky, and we could shoot interviews, sound on film, which we didn't do in the early days where we had no sound, we just had narration over it.
Those first sound cameras were modified so News 2's cameramen could hoist them onto their shoulders and take them right out into the streets.
Sometimes at those days we were shooting 60,000, 70,000 feet of film a month, and it could get right expensive to shoot that much.
In the early years, local television news was broadcast on a Monday through Friday schedule. That changed dramatically in the 60s at WFMY-TV. When Landmark Communications of Norfolk purchased the station from the Greensboro News Company, an increased budget created a large professional news department. News 2 expanded across the weekend, and the first black reporter, Freddie Davis, came to work.
The first story that Freddie covered was a United Way agency meeting, perhaps Boy Scouts, but a United Way agency meeting at Greensboro Country Club. When Freddie arrived and they saw that he was black, they asked him to stand at the front door, went back and picked up the news release and handed it to him and said thank you. And he came back never having even seen the meeting. And I remember at the time that this was extremely offensive and it just seemed out of step. And so I called the United Way and suggested to them, if their organization has to pick and choose the colors of the reporters who cover their affairs, that I would suggest they can hardly exist in the media world, because we can't plan that way. And there was an immediate reaction. They realized that that was wrong.
and they stopped having meetings in segregated places.
But the 60s also saw American teens dancing through the studios of WFMY-TV and out into the station's parking lot. The rock and roll era was in full swing on the weekly RC Dance Party hosted by Bob Waddell.
I would get down and join in with the kids to do the twists, and became part of the show. We all, as I said, we were all into the show so completely. We became so closely involved with each show, and through that, let's see, it was TV Movie Screen Magazine ran a nationwide contest to find the TV personality of the year, and it was the winner was selected through viewers sending in votes to this magazine, and I was first runner-up in the nation.
Nobody seemed to care about ratings. We would use how much mail we would get as a barometer of how well a show was doing, more than we would a rating book.
In 1974, during WFMY-TV's silver anniversary year, another chapter in local television history was written in the Piedmont. Sandra Hughes became the first black woman to host a program on Channel 2.
I went on the air, and you remember back in the old days, we did everything ourselves. I wrote the scripts, called the guests, made out the formats, and even jokingly say sometimes I went in to help put the set up. But I felt this overwhelming responsibility to do something that I wasn't sure what it was I was supposed to be doing. I had people on one side of the city in the black community saying, okay, since you're black, this should be a black show. Isn't that what this is going to be? Then I had people on another side of the community saying, you are black, but you are going to make this a show for everyone, aren't you? There were lots of people in our viewing audience that didn't want to see me doing a talk show on television, and they said so in a number of different ways. I got lots of nasty phone calls at my home, here at work. I got threatening letters. No one ever threatened my life, but people said lots of nasty things in the letters. Even my husband had to put up with lots of nasty comments at his, places that he went to in the city, because people didn't think that the time had come for a black woman to be doing a show by herself on television. One other thing that was very difficult to deal with, we got bomb threats quite often. The show was on live every day at 1 o'clock, and for weeks and weeks we would have someone call and say that there was a bomb somewhere on the set. Now, what that would mean was the guests would have to all be taken out of the studio, but I was determined to make this show work. I wanted to make sure I was doing a good job and that people out there would eventually see that, so I would stay. That's where I learned to talk without stopping, because the guests would all leave and I'd have 30 minutes of show to fill, so I'd just sit there and talk and talk and talk and talk to make sure that show stayed on the air. And after a while, I think our viewers decided, well, this person really is trying to be a person for all people. And they gave me a chance, and all the threats and the nasty letters and the bomb threats stopped.
There was another dramatic breakthrough in the 70s. This one changed the way news was gathered in the Piedmont. The era of ENG, or electronic news gathering, came along with the introduction of the electronic camera.
When tape and ENG equipment came in, we had a race to get it on the air first, and could get it on the air quicker. Some of the equipment was not technically as small as it is today, and even not as small as the film camera we used. But we did put an ENG truck together and be able to do live stuff, and could do press conferences live. I think the first one we did was arrival of President Ford to Greensboro.
Continuing social conflict would not allow Greensboro to escape the 70s without another violent incident. On November 3rd, 1979, a shootout occurred at an anti-Klan rally sponsored by the Communist Workers' Party. After less than a minute and a half of firing, 4 people were dead, 1 was dying, and 9 others were wounded. A News 2 cameraman was in the thick of the shooting.
You are standing there, and just like, that, man, these, and these guys, are suddenly are out there, killing others. And you just start really, going entirely on your instincts as a journalist. Even though you are, of course, are scared, and at one time, during it, I was really, I mean it, it's scared like anything. And yet, you have your, you might say, this commitment, to your community, and also as a journalist. It can be, kind of a difficult, job at times.
Dimension of local television would make lighter use of the new electronic camera. PM Magazine started as an evening experiment on a West Coast station. It was almost immediately successful and quickly expanded into national syndication, with local co-hosts producing features to complement others from participating stations. PM Magazine came to Channel 2 and brought a wave of attractive young people into TV while creating a new set of local stars. As the 70s drew to a close, WFMY-TV's Good Morning Show celebrated a significant anniversary.
20 years, the Good Morning Show to Lee Kylan, a gentleman and a professional on the production department at WFMY-TV.
Thank you, Jerry.
When the Piedmont welcomed the 80s, WFMY-TV staff represented the significant social changes of the 60s and 70s. The people who were making local TV now included bright and capable young women and blacks. They staffed highly visible positions and performed administrative and management duties. The 80s saw a major expansion of WFMY-TV service to Piedmont, North Carolina and Southern Virginia. Boosted by a new tower, nearly 2,000 feet high, Channel 2 signal was beamed to more people than ever before.
And right now, as governor, I'm going to pull this switch, and we're going to go from the old tower to the great new tower of WFMY.
WFMY-TV extended its record of community service by committing its facilities and personnel to the Muscular Dystrophy Association's Jerry Lewis Telethon.
And we've got a lot of people here this morning, so come on down and join us. I'm Bill Copald.
And I'm Mary Jane McKittrick. What a gorgeous Labor Day this is, Bill.
Delightful.
Lots of folks out here, but we need your help. We don't need you to just kind of sit around and enjoy this day too much. We need you to go into action. And what you need to do is get to your phone and call these numbers.
Let's check the Piedmont area tote board right now. Brand new total, $73,973. And that's
aware of the value of higher education in our community, and in a spirit of service to all the people, WFMY-TV became a part of the United Negro College Fund campaign and telethon.
Hi, and good evening. I'm Bill Copald.
And I'm Sandra Hughes. We are very pleased that you're joining us tonight for the Piedmont portion of the Lou Rawls Parade of Stars to benefit the United Negro College Fund.
Our job tonight is to make you get on the phone and give a pledge to the United Negro College Fund. Now, the phone numbers are appearing on your screen. They'll be there all night long. If you live in Greensboro, the number is 668.
But in keeping with our founding tradition of community service, WFMY-TV and its new owner, the Gannett Company, sought out the tireless efforts of the unsung heroes in our community. For them, there was a special honor for public service, awarded only to those who care.
Welcome to the 1989 To Those Who Care Service to the Piedmont Awards. Tonight, WFMY-TV is proud to honor 10 outstanding citizens who have unselfishly dedicated an enormous amount of time and effort to make the Piedmont a better place to live.
this is a program where we select 10 unsung heroes from the community to say thank you for all of the difference they've made in other people's lives. And also a way of showing other people out there who say, oh, I don't have time to spend hours a week with other people. I don't have the money, I don't have the this, or I don't have the energy. It says to them, all you've got to do is do a little something for 1 or 2 people, and you're making a difference.
We ask for you to look and see where you need to be and to respond, to ask a simple question of yourself. What can I do? What should I do? What must I do? Because if these 10 can do so much, how can you and I do any less? Thank you, and good night.
To those who care is symbolic of the progressive spirit of the Piedmont. It shows how individuals have worked to strengthen the fabric of our evolving society. Today, the era of satellite technology has expanded News 2's ability to serve you better by reaching across our state, the nation, and the world. Historically, it's important to remember that the broadcasters who began to make local television at WFMY-TV in 1949 did so from an understanding of the medium as a way of serving the community. To satisfy this philosophy, they assigned people who were willing to communicate to present the programs. The audience came to rely on these communicators and transformed them into local television personalities. Management observed this phenomenon and allowed these men and women to grow into their positions and into the community. For this reason, WFMY-TV consistently ranks today as one of the top television stations in the United States.
I've been at this station what seems like all my life, and I feel I understand what people in our community want and need and the direction we need to take for the future. Now, I'm not trying to say I know everything, but I can feel inside what I think other people are feeling.
This special program was brought to you by Chrysler Jeep Eagle, Gate City Federal, Rice Toyota, Rice-Marko Hyundai,